The train's whistle cut through the November air like a knife through silence. Cordelia Ashworth stepped onto the wooden platform, her worn traveling dress catching on the splintered boards. 3 months of careful planning, every penny saved, every hope pinned to this moment. The telegram had been clear. Jeremiah Caldwell sought a wife. She had answered, but Jeremiah Caldwell was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a cluster of townspeople gathered near the station house, their voices carrying on the bitter wind. She caught fragments of their conversation, each word a blow to her already fragile composure. He changed his mind, they whispered, saw her photograph and decided against it. Left town this morning rather than face the shame of it. Before we continue with Cordelia's impossible situation, hit that subscribe button because what happens next will change everything you thought you knew about second chances. The platform emptied as quickly as it had filled, leaving her alone with her single carpet bag and the growing realization that she had nowhere to go. Winter was coming to this frontier town, and she was as unwanted here as she had been back east. The wind picked up, sending dried leaves skittering across the boards like her scattered dreams. Sheriff Matthias Donovan watched from his office window as the last of the gawkers dispersed. The woman remained on the platform, her shoulders straight despite the cruel blow she had just received. He had witnessed Caldwell's cowardly departure that morning, watched the man flee rather than face his responsibilities. Something in her posture reminded him of a wounded bird still trying to fly. The wind whipped her dark hair across her face as she clutched her bag tighter. Evening was approaching, and temperatures would drop below freezing before midnight. No hotel in town would take an unmarried woman without proper references, especially one so publicly rejected. He found himself crossing the street before conscious thought guided his steps. His boots echoed on the platform as he approached, each footfall deliberate and measured. She turned at his approach, and he saw eyes the color of storm clouds, filled with dignity despite her circumstances. "Miss," he said, removing his hat, "I am Sheriff Donovan. I witnessed what transpired here today, and I want you to know that Caldwell's actions reflect poorly on him, not on you." Her chin lifted slightly. "Thank you for your kindness, Sheriff. I shall manage somehow." "The temperature is dropping," he continued, noting how she shivered despite her attempt to appear composed. "My housekeeper keeps a room ready for travelers in need. It would be no trouble to offer you shelter until you decide your next course." Something flickered in her eyes, hope warring with wariness. She studied his face as if searching for hidden motives. The sheriff's house stood at the edge of town, larger than she had expected for a man living alone. Cordelia followed him through rooms filled with well-crafted furniture and books, noting details that spoke of comfort rather than mere survival. The kitchen hearth glowed with warmth that seemed to reach into her very bones. "Mrs. Henderson will return tomorrow," he explained, lighting a lamp against the gathering dusk. "She keeps house for me and will see to your needs properly. Tonight, I can manage a simple meal." His movements around the kitchen were sure and practiced, not the fumbling of a man and used to domestic tasks. She watched him slice bread and arrange cold meat with surprising care, his large hands gentle with the delicate china. "You need not trouble yourself on my account," she said, though hunger gnawed at her. She had eaten little during the long journey, saving her meager funds. "It is no trouble," he replied, setting a plate before her. A person should not face hardship on an empty stomach. As she ate, he busied himself with small tasks, giving her privacy to compose herself. The food was simple but nourishing, and she found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. The house felt solid around them, a refuge from the harsh judgment of the world outside. When she finished, he showed her to a small but comfortable room upstairs. Clean linens covered the bed, and a wash basin waited on the dresser. Through the window, she could see the town lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Mrs. Henderson proved to be a kindly woman with silver hair and knowing eyes. She accepted Cordelia's presence without question, though her gaze lingered thoughtfully on the sheriff when she thought no one was watching. The days settled into a quiet rhythm. Cordelia insisted on earning her keep, despite Matthias's protests. She mended his shirts with careful stitches, prepared meals that filled the house with warmth and savory scents, and organized his chaotic paperwork with methodical precision. She found herself studying him during their shared meals. He ate with deliberate appreciation, complimenting her cooking with genuine gratitude rather than mere politeness. When she asked about his work, he spoke thoughtfully about the town's people, their struggles and small triumphs, revealing a man who saw beyond surfaces. "You have been sheriff long?" she asked one evening as they lingered over coffee. "5 years now," he replied, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup. "I came here seeking something different from what I had known." There was weight in those words, a story untold. She recognized the careful language of someone guarding painful memories, for she used such words herself. "The town is fortunate to have you," she said quietly. His eyes met hers across the table, and something passed between them, unspoken but understood. They were both refugees from circumstances beyond their control, finding unexpected shelter in this simple kitchen with its glowing hearth and honest conversation. The whispers began when Mrs. Henderson brought news from the mercantile. Cordelia was folding laundry when the older woman entered with a troubled expression, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by concern. "They are talking," Mrs. Henderson said without preamble, settling her basket on the kitchen table with more force than necessary. "The busybodies have nothing better to occupy their minds." Cordelia's hands stilled on the shirt she was mending. "What manner of talk?" "The usual foolishness. Questions about your arrangement here. Speculation about the sheriff's intentions." Mrs. Pemberton suggested it was improper for an unmarried woman to reside under his roof, even with my presence as chaperone. Heat crept up Cordelia's neck. She had expected this, dreaded it even, but hearing it confirmed still stung like winter wind against exposed skin. That evening, Matthias returned from his rounds with tension evident in the set of his shoulders. He hung his hat with deliberate care, avoiding her eyes as he washed his hands at the basin. "You have heard," she said, not making it a question. "Small towns thrive on gossip," he replied, his voice carefully neutral. "It means nothing," but they both knew it meant everything. In a place where reputation was currency, whispers could become weapons. She watched him struggle with something unspoken, his jaw tight with suppressed words. "Perhaps I should seek other arrangements," she said quietly. His head snapped up, eyes fierce. "No, let them talk." The crisis came with the first heavy snowfall. Cordelia was preparing supper when frantic pounding echoed through the house. Matthias answered to find young Tommy Bradshaw, barely 14, his face white with panic beneath his frost-covered hat. "Sheriff, you must come quick," the boy gasped. "My boss sent me. There is trouble at the widow Morrison's place. Her roof collapsed under the snow weight. She is trapped inside with her baby." Matthias was already reaching for his coat and boots. The widow lived 2 miles out, her husband lost to fever the previous spring. She had refused all offers of help, pride keeping her isolated even as winter threatened her small farm. "I will gather medical supplies," Cordelia said, moving toward the kitchen cabinets where she had noticed bandages and healing herbs. "You cannot come," Matthias said firmly. "The weather is too dangerous." She met his gaze steadily. "That woman will need another woman's care, especially if she is injured. You know this to be true." Something passed across his face, recognition perhaps of her practical wisdom. He gave a sharp nod. "Stay close to me. The wind is rising." They rode through swirling snow, Cordelia clinging to the wagon seat as Matthias guided them through the storm. His presence beside her was solid, reassuring, his competent hands steady on the reins even as the wind howled around them. She found herself trusting him completely, this quiet man who faced danger without hesitation. The widow Morrison's cabin was half crushed beneath the weight of snow and broken timber. Matthias worked with quiet efficiency, directing the other men who had arrived to help, while Cordelia tended to Sarah Morrison and her infant son. The woman had suffered a broken arm and cuts from falling debris, but both mother and child would survive. As they prepared to return home, Matthias surprised everyone by producing a leather pouch heavy with coins. For rebuilding, he told the widows simply, no family should face winter without proper shelter. The amount was substantial, more than most men in town saw in a year. Cordelia watched the easy way he dispensed such wealth, as if money held little meaning to him. Questions formed in her mind, observations that had been gathering like snowflakes. His house, she realized, was furnished with items that spoke of significant means. The books were leather-bound and numerous. The dishes were fine china, not the rough pottery most frontier families used. Even his horse was exceptional, a thoroughbred that would cost more than most men's annual wages. During the ride home through the storm, she found courage to voice her curiosity. "You're not simply a sheriff, are you?" His hands tightened on the reins. "What makes you say that?" "The way you live, the ease with which you help others financially. Most lawmen do not possess such resources." He was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then, barely audible above the wind, he spoke. "Wealth is a burden when it comes without purpose." That evening, warmed by the fire and the shared satisfaction of helping others, their careful barriers began to crumble. Matthias sat across from her, turning a carved wooden figure in his hands, his expression distant with memory. "I inherited a shipping fortune," he said quietly. "My father built an empire moving goods along the eastern seaboard. When he died, I discovered the cost of that wealth. Workers treated like chattel, competitors destroyed through ruthless practices, communities left destitute in pursuit of profit." His fingers traced the wooden carving with infinite gentleness. "I tried to change things, to run the business with honor. My business partners disagreed. They arranged to have me declared mentally incompetent, claimed grief had affected my judgment. They seized control and continued the practices I had tried to end." Cordelia understood betrayal, the way it could hollow out a person's faith in humanity. She set down her mending and met his eyes. "So you came here." "I sold what little remained to me and disappeared. Here, I can use what I have to truly help people, not exploit them." She recognized the weight he carried, the guilt of inherited privilege and the determination to atone for sins not entirely his own. Without conscious thought, she reached across the space between them and touched his hand. His fingers still beneath hers, warm and solid. "And what of your story?" he asked softly. "What brought you to answer Caldwell's advertisement?" The shame she had carried for so long seemed suddenly lighter in the face of his trust. Cordelia's voice trembled as she began her own confession. "I was a governess in Boston, employed by the Thornfield family. Their eldest son, Edward, was 22 and charming in the way wealthy young men often are. He pursued me relentlessly, speaking of love and marriage despite the difference in our stations." She paused, gathering strength to continue. "When I found myself a child, he denied everything, claimed I'd seduced him, that I was grasping and ambitious. His father dismissed me without references, ensuring I could find no respectable employment." Matthias's hand turned beneath hers, his fingers intertwining with her own in silent support. "I lost the baby in my 4th month," she whispered. "Perhaps it was mercy, given the circumstances. Afterward, I had nothing. No family, no prospects, no reputation. The mail-order bride advertisement seemed my only chance for a new beginning, somewhere my past could not follow." She met his eyes, expecting judgment, but found only understanding. They sat in the firelight, two wounded souls who had found unexpected sanctuary in each other's company. The sound of approaching horses shattered the intimate moment. Through the window, they could see torches moving up the path, voices raised in anger. Mrs. Pemberton's shrill tone cut through the night air, demanding that the sheriff address the scandal of his household arrangements. The town's patience had reached its end. Their private world was about to face its greatest test. Matthias rose and moved to the door with deliberate calm, though Cordelia could see tension in every line of his body. She followed, staying close enough to hear, but far enough back to avoid immediate confrontation. Mrs. Pemberton stood at the head of a small group of townspeople, her face flushed with righteous indignation. Behind her, Mayor Collins shifted uncomfortably, clearly reluctant to be part of this delegation, but unable to ignore the mounting pressure. "Sheriff Donovan," Mrs. Pemberton declared, her voice carrying across the yard, "this situation has gone on long enough. Decent folk cannot stand by while unmarried persons cohabitate under the guise of charity." Matthias stepped fully onto the porch, his presence commanding despite his quiet demeanor. "Mrs. Pemberton," Mayor Collins, "what brings you out on such a bitter night?" "You know perfectly well why we are here," the woman snapped. That woman has been living in your house for weeks without proper supervision. It is a scandal that reflects poorly on our entire community. Miss Ashworth is a guest in my home, Matthias replied evenly. She has conducted herself with complete propriety, and Mrs. Henderson serves as adequate chaperone. The mayor cleared his throat nervously. Matthias, perhaps there could be other arrangements. The boarding house might accommodate her. Cordelia felt her heart sink. The boarding house would not take her without references, and they all knew it. This was their way of forcing her to leave town entirely. Matthias straightened to his full height, and something in his bearing commanded attention. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to making difficult decisions. Mrs. Pemberton, you are correct that this situation requires resolution. Miss Ashworth deserves better than whispered speculation about her character. Cordelia's heart clenched, expecting him to ask her to leave. Instead, he turned toward her, his eyes steady and sure. Cordelia, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? The words fell into the winter night like stones into still water, creating ripples of shock among the gathered townspeople. Mrs. Pemberton's mouth opened and closed without sound, while Mayor Collins blinked rapidly as if trying to process what he had heard. Cordelia stared at Matthias, searching his face for any sign that this was mere expedience, a solution to their immediate problem. What she saw instead was quiet determination and something deeper, warmer, that made her pulse quicken. I am not asking from obligation, he continued, his voice gentler now but still carrying to the crowd. I am asking because somewhere between your arrival and this moment, I have come to care for you deeply. You have brought warmth to my house and purpose to my days. She stepped forward, her decision crystallizing with each heartbeat. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I will marry you. The crowd began to disperse, their mission transformed from scandal prevention to wedding preparation. Mrs. Pemberton huffed, but could find no argument against a proper engagement. Spring arrived with their wedding, held in the small church with Mrs. Henderson weeping tears of joy and even Mrs. Pemberton grudgingly offering congratulations. Cordelia wore a simple blue dress that Matthias had quietly commissioned from the town seamstress, the fabric finer than anything she had ever owned. As they exchanged vows, she marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as public rejection and desperate circumstance had transformed into something precious and real. When Matthias slipped the golden band on her finger, his touch was reverent, as if he still could not quite believe she had chosen him. Their first year passed like pages in a beloved book, each day adding to their shared story. Matthias used his resources thoughtfully, helping families through harsh winters and supporting the widow Morrison as she rebuilt her life. Cordelia found her place not just as his wife, but as a trusted voice in their community, her past no longer a source of shame, but evidence of her strength. On quiet evenings, they would sit by their fire, sometimes talking, sometimes simply enjoying the comfortable silence between two people who had found their home in each other. The loneliness that had once defined them both seemed like a distant memory. Have you ever found belonging in the most unexpected places? She would sometimes wonder. Have you discovered that what society rejects as impossible can become the very foundation of everything beautiful in your life? Share your own story of unexpected love in the comments below.